All right.
Live is live.
Welcome to the Global Book Club podcast. This is our second podcast, and we're going to be talking about Tower of Basel by Adam Labor. And it's a book about the central bank's central bank, which is the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, hence the name Tower of Basel. So the first question I want to ask is, what surprised you guys most about this book? And I would say, Ryan, you go ahead and lead us off because it's most fresh in your mind.
Okay. I really like the dedication of the book. At the beginning of the book, it talks about this book is for the people that ask the right questions. And it goes in detail of what specifically happened in 2008, the economic collapse period. And I also liked the idea of money. It talks about the worth is completely arbitrary. He goes in depth and talks about the Fae, which is an island community in Micronesia. The colony is actually Yat. And so they came up with a concept of disstones, and which is money, and it's completely arbitrary. So what had happened was whenever the English colonists landed on this island, they would write X's. They had to cross out these stones just so that they could get their attention. The Englishmen got them to farm, till the land that they wanted to do. And another interesting thing was whenever they would transfer the stone discs of money from island to island, sometimes they would fall off, sink to the ground, but still they had value underneath the water. So it's very similar to with central banks. You have this idea that you can send money digitally, and it's it's basically just a bill of sale. I guess it's a word. Somebody help me out with that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I don't know what that word is, but I think I get what you're saying. Like they, because they had paper versions of all these massive stones, and the stones were, theoretically, they were what was valuable. But then eventually they were like, well, we shouldn't carry around these heavy stones. Let's just have paper represent the stones. And then sometimes the stones would fall off of boats, and they'd sink to the bottom of the ocean, so nobody could get it. But they still had the paper that represented that stone, and that paper still traded as if it was on land. So it's kind of the same as gold or silver. Back in the day, a dollar bill represented an amount of silver that you were owed by the central bank, and then over time, they kind of dropped that gold in the ocean, so to speak. They just made it to where you couldn't ever get it. But the paper still traded around, and after a long enough time, people just forgot. So it was kind of interesting. But I'll answer the question real quick. The most surprising thing to me was the deep ties to the Nazi Party and how crucial BIS was for World War II and allowing the Germans all this money, basically, because without the BIS to facilitate these gold transfers, they would have never had the money necessary to hire these armies and invade countries. So I had known a little bit about that before this book, but I really didn't understand the depth of it until I read it.
Right. You go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, both of those were great points. I don't know, it was a really broad coverage of world finance, the history of it, and then I don't know, different ways that people have handled it, different societies. And it's just mind-boggling, man. The Nazis were crazy. It completely blew my mind because I worked in finance for 2 years, right? And it was for the ultra high net worth. That's the people who we worked with. So anybody with over $30 million.
Damn.
Yeah, and so I grew up on a tree farm, right? No experience with money or anything. And networked my way into this job after having a business degree, graduating college and stuff. And absolutely mind-boggling, man. We would plan out, 3 generations out for estates and stuff, right?
Wow.
So, we'd get it was wild because we didn't work directly with these people. It was through financial firms, right? And we would get hired through them to do it. And so imagine getting, $1 billion at 25 through a trust, and then it lasts for 3 generations, right? And they've calculated generational estate skipping transfer tax and all these different formats for trusts, man. And it's just you use life insurance because it's tax free and you can use it internationally. And that's when the team that I was working on individually, like, started getting into like international like loopholes about 6 months before I quit, and that really just kind of like that set like the moral like death knell in me. You know, like there was no way I could continue working. Like just doing it in the U.S. is really bad, but then also doing it like internationally was just completely mind-boggling. And so like even with all this like influence around me all the time, and like my goal was like to find loopholes, and so like to not know about the the Bank for International Settlements completely blew my mind. When Sean mentioned this book, it was like, hey man, we're gonna read this book, The Tower of Basel. I was like, that sounds cool. Like, you know, it's just like Lord of the Rings like fanfic or like. But I mean, it turns out like there's this bank that's like, you know, since 1929, the Great Depression, you know. And like it's the central bank for central banks, and that completely blows my mind because I feel like I have a really firm grasp on international finance and like economics, but I had no idea this existed, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But yeah, watching like that progression, the history. I love the history of the U.S. like part in the entire like growth of the Bank for International Settlements, right? Because we don't start it as a country. We started as corporations, which is so ironic to me because we're in 1929, you know, the Great Depression, which, like, I guess we'll probably look at, like, 2008, kind of like the Great Depression in the future, I feel like. Yeah. That would be, like, a thing, you know? People will look back and like, oh,
yeah,
for
sure.
Great Depression, yeah. But, like, we were kind of shielded from it because we're at an age where we didn't have, like, you know, these huge liabilities or kids or, like, you know, all this debt, like, you know, house and all this, you know, our retirement sacked away in stocks and stuff. So we didn't lose everything, you know? We're just, like, young kids. Like, we're just in debt because of, like, student loans and stuff, you know, car debt or whatever. But, like, it was wild just to see it progress from we had a gold standard before the Great Depression, you know? We had a real, like, every single U.S. dollar bill is backed by a certain amount of gold.
$35 worth. Yeah,
right? Mm-hmm. And then 1929, we said, hey, let's not do that anymore because we need to, like, churn our economy and like, use more money, you know, right? Yeah, 1933, but, like, the 29 is like, you know, like the realization that like
rock bottom.
The way that like we're using capitalism, it's not Adam Smith's idea of capitalism. Like 1929 hits, like it's because it's like the mortgage crisis. It's just like 2008. Like it's not like socially beneficial. It's not socially beneficial economics. It's just like bullshit. Like somebody created this. Yeah, exactly. Somebody created this. It's finance. It's like you know, it's horrible. And so. I don't know, just that watching the evolution of that completely blew my mind because we're repeating it now. 2008 was the LIBOR scandal, right? And so it's like fixing interest rates, you know? But like the thing is, like money's not, it's fiat now, right? It's not money anymore, it's currency. So money is something that's backed by like a resource, like a physical, like tangible, like finite resource is a better way to say it. Versus like, so Bitcoin is a finite money. It's not currency because it's money because it's backed by the idea that there's only 20 million Bitcoin going to be created. It's finite, right? I think it's a number 20 million, right? And so like no more after that. Limited amount, limited supply, and that's like classic economics. But when you have something like derivatives or betting on stuff that doesn't exist yet or like it's futures and stuff, it's like where's the limit? Where's the ceiling? There is no ceiling. Right? So it just completely eschews everything, and then you have people just soaking up tons of money like the Nazis were doing with the Bank for International Settlements, and it was completely legal, and just like they used it to like ruin the world, right? And that's what's essentially happening right now. It's insane.
What was the most surprising part to you, Sean?
Yeah, I would say the deep ties to history that I had no idea that was like as prevalent as it was, and the fact that the U.S. was contracting these big companies in Germany that were, you know, and they knew that they were using slave labor in order to fulfill these contracts. And slave labor.
Yeah, what was that one? IG something.
IG.
Oh yeah,
IG Farben. Yeah. So all these big American banks knew that this industrial company in Germany was like employing slave labor from the concentration camps, and they knew exactly how long they could make somebody work on like minimum nutrition. Like they could get 3 months out of a a Jew that was like captured basically, and like, but that
Same.
was part of the assembly line, was just like you use them for 3 months and then you gas them and they're dead. Like,
Human in the
just
form of
man,
commodities.
Yeah.
industrialized humanity. It was nuts.
Yeah. And then I guess on top of that, to see that like the European Union, like we're really waking up to high finance towards like the end of the European Union, like the crumbling of it, and we started to see that with the 2008 crisis. But then to really understand that this has been in planning since like the 50s or the 60s, it like gives me this sense like, dude, the people who are making this world go round at the moment, like they didn't give a shit about any of us being in the world. Like they're just planning, we're essentially consumers that can keep feeding their paycheck and their bills. So
Yeah,
it
I
like
don't know. I kind of don't like that view so much because they're not making the world go round. That's angular momentum.
right,
And I just feel like we give too much credit to these high elite people. And I told Tyler Olson the other day, like, I think the
right,
goat herders were the most important people throughout history. And, like, we all give credit to the people who wrote shit down because they wrote shit down and then we read about it. And I
right.
almost feel like the same way about the BIS. Oh, man. Can one of y'all hook up Ryan with an invite? Or let me see if I can do it again.
Yeah, I think
He just
yeah,
got kicked. I think I got it.
yeah.
Hey, but Sean, maybe you could go into like the history of this, or Huey, you too. Like, how did the BIS get started, and like, how did it evolve to be such a powerful organization?
What was it? It was
What's that?
the reparations. They
Right.
were planning on how they were going to settle German reparations because they lost the war. And so
Right.
Right.
they
So
were
it all
trying
started from the end of World War One, huh?
Right.
right. They were trying to plan a group to organize how Germany was going to repay the winners of the war,
Right.
essentially.
Yeah,
And
because
then,
like, hey, you
And then,
started the war, so you're gonna pay us back for having to end it.
and then what happened? Did they ever get paid back? Like, right?
no,
Didn't
that's
the
the thing.
reparations just fall through after like 10 years? And then the
So
whole point of the BIS just
It
got
was for that.
conflated,
you had like you
right?
had the BIS set up by like the I think it was the central banker from Germany, right? I think that's what the idea was. And then it was like Montague Norman, I think was the other guy, and he was like the central banker from England, right? And so they set up the Bank for International Settlements above all international law, above all like rules and regulations, because they needed a body to transfer the money and handle the accounting and stuff like fairly. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's why I set up the BIS. And so like through controlling the BIS, that German central banker, right, who was the head of Germany's, like I don't know if it turned into the Reichsbank later on, whenever the Nazis took power, or if it was always called the Reichsbank. I can't quite remember. But like essentially, like he held so much power that he was able just to like say, hey, we're going to negotiate our way down on how much we actually owe.
Right.
Because we can't pay this back because we're like trying to restart our economy and stuff. And then like eventually they just said, hey, you're just gonna absolve us of all his debt, and never happened.
Right. So yeah, before that though, one of the most interesting parts to me was also this whole Weimar Republic and how they had a hyperinflation because like after World War One, they had this huge bill, like, or the winners of World War One told Germany like, you owe us all this money, like you just said, and then they tried to print their way out of it at first, right? And then hyperinflated the currency, and then that kind of led to this whole BIS, and then um, one of the other interesting parts to me was how they tried to like keep it quiet at first. Like the first 30 years or so, the BIS was trying to be real hidden. Like I remember they said the main door to the building was like behind a chocolate factory, like in Basel or something.
Some random
Um,
street.
Hotel on a
but
yeah,
then, you know, after a while, they were able to like assert enough whatever power or prove their influence in the world.
influence. Yeah,
And what was it, like 1960 or 70 that they built the actual tower that the book's named after,
yeah, I think
Yeah.
and
so.
came out and kind of demonstrated like we don't have to hide anymore, like we're a global
Right.
superpower on our own basically.
Right. And while we're at it, let's talk about how So essentially, they operate under like a UN type treaty. So all workers, any worker who works there full time doesn't have to pay taxes on any of the money they make from there.
International scale.
Right. They're automatically absolved from any decisions that they have to make under the influence of working for the BIS. So if any of their decisions lead to, say, monetary
War
collapse,
crimes.
that murders 200 million people, then they're not responsible. And the Swiss police and the Swiss authorities actually have to ask them if they're able to get into their building because legally they're their own entity. They're not under Swiss law. So yeah, and if you guys can think of any more, I think there might be more. Honestly.
Yeah,
no taxes.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. Another part that was interesting to me was the different personalities of the these different leaders, like at different points. Like I think they were talking about how the first president of the bank was like super antisocial and like had problems talking to people out loud, basically, and like he would I don't know, have these panic attacks and shit, and just like, but somehow he gained the respect of all these kind of rich, important people for whatever reason. And they gave him this position of huge power, but like, I don't know. Yeah, it's funny to think of these people as human almost, because like we think of them as like detached and like, you know, the leader of the bank. It's like, it's almost like a movie star or something. It's like it doesn't fit into your brain like a real person. But it was fun for me through this book to like really try to put myself in their position and like think of what it would have been like to interact with these people, or like. I don't know. And that was one of the cool parts the author did. Like, at times it was hard because it was so detailed and, like, so deep. And, you know, these back histories and, I don't know. I can't remember all these people's names.
Research paper. It's like a research paper.
It is. It's like, this is, it's more like a reference book than almost like a novel or something.
Yeah.
But it's cool, and especially like Huey was saying at the beginning, like it's this whole secret thing that even people who are deep into economics and like world finance and all that stuff, like sometimes they've never even heard of the BIS, or if they have, they don't know the history.
Right.
So yeah, it's
their abilities. Really, it's just their abilities. Like overall, the biggest thing that blows my mind is that central bankers meet monthly and talk about international finance behind closed doors. That absolutely blows my mind. Because you've had people like Ben Bernanke and like Janet Yellen, not so much, which is crazy because that's kind of like a measuring like measurement of like our current economy and like where the global like I don't know, I guess economy itself is heading. Like the only reason the world economy right now is afloat is because of the United States and China, right? Because they haven't started defaulting on credit and stuff and debt. And so, like, I mean, as soon as like the Chinese credit bubble pops, like the world economy is just going to go into a like, we had a Great Depression. It's going to be like the great, like, I don't even know what you would call it, like far worse, right? And so,
it's so
like,
hard for me to say that. Like, I believe it strongly, but I've been thinking that for like 4 or 5 years now. Like every year, I'm like,
I mean,
it not collapsed yet.
Well, you have to
like,
think.
I don't know. This year
if the economy was operating on fundamentals, then this would have been over a long time ago. But we're not operating. Yeah,
it's
the belief that it works and that there's no better way, essentially, that keeps it running. And a lot of people don't think about that. Like,
totally.
I mean, there's no value proposition left behind any of the world currencies. There's no like tangible resource or like finite restriction on the like. It's not money anymore. It's currency, right? So, like, I don't know. Like, Michael, it's hilarious. You brought up the. It feels like it's felt like 5 years, right? Or like whatever. It's felt like a long time. It's been coming or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, what's happening? You know. But like on the grand scheme of like, we just read about the history of Bank for International Settlements. Like it was founded in 1929, and like it's been going all the way till now, and like. The influence that it's slowly exerted throughout the world is just phenomenal. And now the current power it has is like absolutely ridiculous. And so if you think about like 2008, like that was nuts, right? But that was like we're a small lifespan, right, compared to like history. And so like in 2008, before 2008, we were like the economy was awesome. It was like the greatest thing ever, right? And then like sudden crash. But like the Fed, right? That's like, I think that's like our classic world barometer is the United States Federal Reserve, right? Because it's a private bank, but it like loans money to the U.S. government, and then it loans money to like other banks, like through the BIS and stuff, and then also directly like Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan, like all of those giant like right fat cat banks. And so like before 2008, the rate that the Federal Reserve lent money to those banks was 5.8%, which is like, okay, that was like a house back then. That was the mortgage interest rate on a house, right? And then like credit cards are 20%, and back then they were 30% interest rate. And then like it was absolutely wild, right? And so this crash happens, and if we hadn't have had this bailout, right, this not really people understand what the bailout was, and then like people don't understand, especially millennials, which kills me because like we're the ones that needed to like take it over and stuff. And so
well, plus the bailout was so many different things. Actually, there was like
quantitative
TARP,
easing, right? Classic.
Like, all these, Operation Twist, QE1, QE2, QE3.
Yeah, quantitative easing, right? Yeah. So like, if you think about it, like what we had to do to like get the economy churning again, right? Which now it's like the growth is just hilarious. It's not anywhere near what it was before. It's just like it's like slowly dying is what's happening, right? And so like immediately in 2008, we had to lower that rate that we were like charging people money for, the U.S. Federal Reserve, the private bank that gives out our dollar bills, the people's dollars.
Oh, not my dollars. I don't do that stuff.
But still, like that's like they're the ones we have to pay that back. Like that's what our taxes are going.
I don't.
That
I
debt,
am not
right?
paying a cent.
We're not paying those taxes. You and the 1%. And so, like, if you think about it, like they had to drop that interest rate to 0.25%, and it's been that since 2008. So
and now they're talking
beginning of this year, we raised it by another 2. That's what the European Central Bank has been doing for the past like
Japan.
2 or 3 years.
And the Fed
they
is
give you money to
publicly,
take money.
like they're talking about it. And the crazy thing with negative interest rates, though, is like you basically have to ban cash. If you go more than negative like 1%, people would just take out their cash from the banks and literally bury it in their backyards, and that's safer than leaving it in a bank where you have to pay money.
Well, if you think about it,
lose money if you have a negative interest rate policy.
So a negative interest rate, a negative interest rate would mean the bank's paying you to take their money. No, the
other way around. You're paying the bank.
We're paying the bank already with interest rates. It's a positive interest rate, right? We're paying them to like use their money, right? That's what a credit card is. Right. It's like, hey man, you get $2,000, and then once you go over that $2,000, we're gonna start charging you 20% interest or whatever, right? But a negative interest rate means that like the European Central Bank has been giving Wells Fargo and been giving, it's not really like it's been giving like whatever the fuck. There's a bunch of British banks. I forget all the names. LIBOR, banks, all those. Barclays, fucking UBC, whatever. And so like it's been giving money to those banks to take money and use the money within the economy and generate more like economy, right? Growth and like keep the economy churning.
Both things are correct. That when you're borrowing money from them, they're essentially paying you to borrow money. But also, like Michael's saying, when you're trying to deposit,
I see what you're saying, Michael. Yeah, you're still
like
I'm a saver, so I'm thinking that direction.
Right. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's opportunity cost. What could you do with that money? That's what investing is.
So one thing I want to say about them is, like you can especially us seeing Uber in regards to like the taxi industry and stuff like that too. You can see how BIS caught on so well with these central banks because it was the first true instance of transnational finance, and it was completely disruptive. All of a sudden, they had access to way more capital than they ever had, and a ton of new trades came about that weren't ever available before transnational finance leading up to that point. Because you literally there were no middleman banks that established themselves as quote-unquote clearinghouses.
Right, international clearinghouse. Or international taxes.
And I think we should do a future talk about the IMF maybe, because I am still a little bit confused about how they fulfill different needs for central banks, because I know lately the IMF has been kind of more significant, perhaps, or maybe at least more public, and the BIS is, at least I never hear it talked about. So that was one of the cool parts about this book. But maybe we should investigate the IMF in a future broadcast. But I was thinking, in terms of keeping these kind of short, maybe we could try to do like another round of questions and then close it out.
Yeah.
Sure. What's the final question? I don't even know.
Well,
what does this mean for your future?
Okay, that's a great one.
Yeah.
For me, it's encouraging me to hold assets that are outside of the control of banks in general, central banks, all these things. So that's why I have some Bitcoin, I have some silver, I have some gold, and I have some Litecoin, and some physical cash dollar bills, because during a transition period that might be important. But yeah, it's really taught me to like think outside the BIS, how to think outside this banking cartel that I really don't want to participate in. Right. That's my best.
Louis, what does it mean for the future?
Yeah, man. I mean, a lot of it, like, it just kind of fuels my desire to like build, software that kind of alleviates all of this issue. So like moving from finance, like my main goal this whole time, like why I wanted to learn programming was like I have a great idea for a finance app, right? Because I want to open source all the like tax loopholes and like understanding of finance and like generational estate planning, right? Like I want to automate all of that and like turn it into like a free app for millennials, right? Because like we're the ones who got screwed. We never got taught anything about finance in like grade school, like, and then they just like as soon as you graduate from high school, it's like, hey, here's a 7% student loan. Like, pay this off over the next 30 years. You're like, oh, cool, I get to go to college for free? It's like, no. Like, you're going to pay 7% interest on $100,000 for 30 years. Like, you want a house.
If you pay it back.
Like, you want a house in the 90s or early 2000s or whatever the hell it was. Right. Like, absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, I've been working on this app called Millennial Falcon, but it's really going to be like Millennial Finance or something.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's still in prototype stages or whatever. But, like, yeah, dude, like that's the whole goal is just to like why let the fat cats have money when we could just automate our entire financial lives and just like all I want to like live by is a break-even number. Like I don't want to be in debt at all, and I just want to like know how much money I have coming in and then how much I need to pay to the game or whatever, It's like your everyday finances and then like nothing else. I don't have to type in numbers. I want it all to be automated and just like self-writing algorithms. Not so much maybe, but. One day, but like, yeah, man, like, there's no reason why that can't happen right now. And so, like, learn those skills and do it myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a theme amongst all of us is that we all kind of want to like, localize our lives a bit more. We want to be able to do the most that we can to take care of the most of our needs possible. And, like, that includes building communities around ourselves so that we have good friendships and good relationships in order to facilitate trade or facilitate the transfer of ideas that create value and resources for all of us. Right. I think what it means for my future is like I see how necessary it is, A, to be able to take care of your own needs, like as in growing food and defending yourself and creating good communities around yourself, but also B, create value for yourself and go inside the current monetary paradigm and get some of those resources and see how that can expand your influence sphere, like throughout, amongst your current relationships and then the ones that you can build utilizing your current relationships. And like I think a perfect example of that is like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was, we were on a sailboat, like, and doing exactly what we're doing now with a smaller group of people. And like, look at this now. We have people from all over Texas and all over the world that we have just found out that are like super interested in the same exact things we have. And so it's not like we're creating our communities now instead of trying to turn our old communities into who we are. It's like we're just people that are like-minded and building on top of each other and having a freaking blast doing it. And,
exactly.
Hell yeah. Dude, I think that's the most important, is showing everybody how we're having fun doing. Nobody wants to do something if it's not fun. So like, we gotta show everybody like whatever this is, the little free academy community, like doing podcasts, reading books, and like learning and sharing our knowledge.
Right. And I think just as smiles on our faces as we talk about these things. Like,
Hell yeah. Well, I think that was a great talk. If you guys are ready, we can go ahead and close it out and get together again soon for another podcast.
cool.
sure.
Michael, go ahead and tell them what the next book will be.
Okay, so our next book is going to be The Art of Not Being Governed. I can't remember the author right now, but I'll post it below. And it's mainly about this region of Southeast Asia that encompasses like 100 million people. It crosses a few different borders around Northeast India, Cambodia, Laos, like Western Vietnam. This region, there's like a mountainous highlands that for like the past 1,000 to 2,000 years has pretty much avoided all government. And the author of the book invites us to consider that maybe they are fleeing to the highlands on purpose to avoid governance. Throughout history, people have kind of pointed these people as saying like they're backwards, they're behind the times, they don't have our technology, and they're almost putting them down, saying like we should help them catch up. But the author makes the point that he thinks they went there on purpose, and they started cultivating crops that were hard to tax on purpose, and like they started living in places that were hard to govern on purpose to avoid all the negative side effects of the state, like conscription, disease, war, all these things. So I was thinking maybe about a month from now. It's a pretty big book, so maybe we can give people a month and get together again for another Free Academy Global Book Club podcast.
Do this.
And if you're interested in participating, you should sign up for free at freeacad.com. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel over here somewhere. Anyways, and thank you all for watching, and thanks Sean and Huey for participating. Any last remarks, you guys?
Yeah, one last thing. We'll start up the Global Podcast Club as well soon, and we're going to be, the same thing as we're doing now. We'll kind of subscribe a single podcast to listen to, and then we'll have everybody listen to it, and then just come on here and share and record, our thoughts on the podcast that we listen to, and then recommend a new one and go from there. So if you want to join, same thing, sign up on Free Acad and we'll go from there.
Damn.
Sounds
awesome.
good.
Thanks, guys. This was awesome, man. Good chat.
See you guys. That was awesome. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. See ya.